Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by Dachelle McVey, who is a homeschooling mom of three and a self proclaimed book addict. That would be me too. She loves chocolate and has been known to hide it from her children. She can often be found hiding in the closet, reading a good book, or even sometimes just an okay book, and enjoying a jar of Nutella. She shares about her homeschool adventures at hidethechocolate.com when she's not creating book clubs at literaryadventuresforkids.com. And I love that just reality of sometimes it's a great book and sometimes, it's just an okay book because, sometimes you just need some ice cream in your reading life, just like you do in your food diet.
That's very true. Sometimes you want a book that you just know how it's going to end.
Exactly. Well, Dachelle, would you please start by telling us a little bit about your family and how you came to start homeschooling?
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Dachelle McVey, and as you can tell by my accent, I am from the southern part of the United States. And we have really bad allergies here because of all the pollen. So you'll have to excuse my occasional cough. But I have three children. One is already graduated. He's in college and actually about to graduate from college. And then I have one in high school and one in middle school. And we've been homeschooling for quite some time. I honestly don't remember how many years. People ask me that. I'm like, I don't know, somewhere around 10.
Long time.
It's been a while. And so the biggest question I get asked is, why did you decide to homeschool? And we do not fit into any of the normal criteria. There were no problems with our school. We have actually a really good private school that is 5 minutes away from my house. That has never been an issue for us. My kids were not having problems in school. I literally just thought it'd be more fun to homeschool.
I love that.
And so we've had a lot of fun and we get to do what we want to, when we want to, and how we want to. And, it's very interesting and it's somewhat prophetic. My daughter, I was in the car with her just a few moments ago. And as she was talking about the private school. She goes over there for one class a day because I do not teach science, so she goes over there for biology. And she was coming home and she was talking about the kids at the school and how they had to take this class or that class. And she said that the board was telling them what classes they had to take. And she said, I don't understand. Why would you want to do that where somebody else makes your decisions about what you can take, what classes you can take? And I just started laughing because we've made such a point about her, especially because she's in high school now, so she's trying to, go out in the world in a few years, that she has to take control of her education. So she decides what she wants to learn and how she wants to learn it. And with her, she wants to go into the medical field. So it's very important to her to take the classes she wants to that she thinks is going to get her there. And I just thought that was so prophetic. I was like, interesting.
Yes. I love that. And I can so relate to that as a second generation homeschooler. I have never had to follow somebody else's schedule or fit inside a box. And so I would really have a hard time giving up that freedom
Yeah.
now with my own children. And sometimes I see even in the homeschool world, there's like this new set of boxes that we're trying to fit inside. And I'm like, no, I don't want anyone telling me what I have to do on a certain day with my kids. I want to decide that for myself. That's part of the fun. That's part of the adventure for me.
Exactly. That's one of the things that a lot of people in my local community have asked because, so many of them had to start doing um, school at home, or I hesitate to call it homeschooling. Very few of them have turned to homeschooling, but a lot of them have said they're homeschooling. And we talked a lot about that. It's not the same thing, but they want to be able to get back into the system when it opens back up next year after COVID and things. And I understand that, but I keep saying it's not the same thing. It's just so very different because you're not making the decisions. Somebody else is making all the decisions for you. You're just there with your kid all day. That's literally the only thing that's like homeschooling.
And that might be sometimes the harder part of.
That is the hard part of homeschooling, absolutely.
Okay, so you came in, you were like, this will be fun. And you came into homeschooling. I'm sure it's just been all fun and games the whole way through. But tell me how your experience, maybe, the good and the maybe more challenging, and then how your kind of approach to homeschooling has grown or changed over the years.
Well, I'm not kidding about the hard part of homeschooling is being home with your kids. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I love my kids and I obviously chose to homeschool them because I wanted to spend time with them. But when you're with somebody 24 hours a day, every single day, you start to get on each other's nerves. And sometimes that is the hardest part. And sometimes it's good for, especially those of us who are homeschool moms whose husbands may be away at work, that when they come home, you have your little family dinner and then say, okay, I'm off now. I'm going to go take a bath or sit in the hot tub or whatever I'm going to do. Or maybe I'm just going to head out to the porch and do some work without anybody else asking me questions. So you get to field all those questions. So I think that really is the hardest part of homeschooling. Um, but then that pulls me to the second question you asked was our philosophy and how we got started. And we got started as Charlotte Mason homeschoolers. And the reason why I was doing this, I'm obviously a huge literature fan. So anything that was based solely on literature was going to be, yeah, in my wheelhouse there. And my husband is in the medical field. And so he is very traditional school, you learn the stuff, you take the test, you learn the stuff, you take the test. And he's always being tested. He's being tested in his career. He has to ever so often go take boards and things like that. So he's a very traditional set. And I am probably a little more freewheeling than he is. And so our first thing when we started was we really tried to do school at home. And I was trying to do that with Charlotte Mason. And I was trying to follow all the rules because, we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we want to do this order. And I promise you, within about the first 9 weeks of that year, I was so upset. The kids were so upset. We were all in tears. I mean, it was just crazy. And I said, oh, something's got to give here because I can't follow all the rules and be the perfect little school. And everybody was sitting in their little desk. It was so cute. And they had their little workbooks and everybody had their little special things that were labeled with their names. And my oldest, who had been in school for quite a while when we spent it, he was having none of it. This is awful. I can't believe you're forcing me to stay with mom all day. I want to go visit my friends. It was a nightmare. And I literally just had to say to myself, this is it. I'm done. I'm throwing it away. And I literally threw it away. I just picked up stuff and started throwing it in the trash. And then that's when I discovered we're not Charlotte Mason homeschoolers. We are relaxed Charlotte Mason homeschoolers. And I realized that I didn't have to follow all the rules. There's a lot of rules out there for a lot of philosophies. And I didn't want to do them. I want to do some of the things, but I knew all the things. And I wanted to be able to say, I don't like this. I'm not going to do it. And so we kind of became, Julie Barger is one of my mentors, and I love her dearly and have been friends with her for several years. And she said one day, I give you permission to just not do anything today or just change the schedule or throw it away. And I thought, wow, I never felt like I had that ability, that I had to follow all these rules. And then I had to explain to my husband why we're doing all this. And obviously he gets on board with me because he likes living with me. But it was hard. And I think that is the biggest lesson that I learned was it's okay to not follow all the rules and do everything everybody's saying. And it's especially okay if you buy a curriculum not to do everything in that curriculum. That's the hard part is to, especially if you're a rule follower, to give that up.
Yes, indeed. Let's see, I can't remember which season or which episode it was now, but I talked to Pam Barnhill, and the way she describes their homeschool is she calls it us schooling, which I just
Right.
loved. And because it just shows that you learn from all these different philosophies, you gain principles, you find good ideas. Sometimes you even learn from the parts of it that you're like, well, I don't really want to include that in my homeschool, but you're still learning, you're thinking about things in a new way. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out what's going to be best for your own family. And so I I like her little, it's us schooling. It's our own little family.
Yes, I like Pam's philosophy too.
Okay, so we take our job very seriously as homeschool moms, as you were expressing, at the beginning, you have like the list and the rules and all these things. And then over time, you sort of started realizing, no, I'm going to figure out how I want to use this, with the freedom and flexibility that homeschooling was giving you. But I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit here about how do we stay focused and, do the things that we've decided we want to do, but still include some joy and flair in our homeschool day. How do we have both of those things?
Well, that's kind of what I do. That's what How the Chocolate is all about, really, and Literary Adventures for Kids, is that we spend a lot of time talking about how to add enchantment to our day. And you can phrase that any way you want to. We use the word enchantment, but you could use the word joy or that little spice or that little extra bit that makes the day worthwhile. And I think a lot of times it's not, let me just say, it's not wrong to teach your kids that there are things we have to do. And they're just things you have to do, and you don't like it, and you just do it because that's life. Suck it up. You're going to have to eventually do the laundry, or you're going to run out of clothes. There's just things like that. You're going to have to put the dishes in the dishwasher and then take them out. So there are things in life that you just have to do. And sometimes that means that you have to do math, even if you absolutely despise math, or you have to teach your kid biology or find some other way to do it. I really don't like sciencey things. I actually do like science. I don't like dissecting things. So that's why I'm not doing biology.
I am with you. Yes. I tried to outsource dissections last year, and then, everything shut down. So they never really got their dissections.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for you on that. Yeah, I didn't even do that in college. I mean, I waited till my senior year for the biology thing and made the little guy who was my friend, who was the teacher's aide, dissect the mouse. I couldn't do it. I was like, I'm not doing it. But anyway, I digress.
We digress.
So what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So there are things that you have to do, and that's okay. But we need to mix it up some and have some little bits of flair, some little bits of enchantment. So what we do around here is we do things like poetry tea times or book clubs or an enrichment group where we have more of our hands-on fun things that we do. We go out, we field school. There's just little things. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's something that's out of the ordinary. Because obviously you can't have an enchantment if it's ordinary. It has to be extraordinary. And you have to have something that is a special treat for the kids. So if they, if you can take them out one day and say, okay, we're studying about history and we are studying about this period. And you know what? About an hour away, there's a historical site that was this period. Let's go out there and let's take an adventure and let's just spend the day out there doing that. And we don't do any math that day. We don't do any grammar that day. We're just having fun. Or it's, we've read this book. We've just finished this awesome book. For example, yesterday, Birch Bark House, we just finished that. So we're talking about Native Americans, and we got out the deep fryer and we made fry bread and some honey on that. That was so yummy. I love fry bread. Totally not on my diet, but still. And we drank some sarsaparilla tea, and then we planted some pumpkins. Granted, we'll have pumpkins in July instead of when we're supposed to, but that's okay. And we even did some basket weaving, all because that was our enchantment and that joy and that fun of bringing what we studied together. I'm not saying do that every day because obviously that's going to be exhausting for mom. But if you can do that once a month or twice a month or something like that, throw in some little bit of things that make it fun. Even if it's as simple as saying, it's been a rough week. Math has been hard. We've learned about conic sections and it's difficult. Let's have math and milkshakes. And we're going to head out to our favorite little trolley stop that sells these awesome milkshakes. And we're going to take our math book and we're going to sit there and we're going to do our math while we're sipping on our milkshakes. It's just as simple as that. Just some way to add some little enchantment into your day that gives the kids a break, but also gives you a little break and change. Because if going out to the little trolley stop and doing math is going to be stressful on you, don't do it because the kids will know and it won't be fun for them either.
That is such a good encouragement too. All those ideas you were giving, some are like, okay, we're going to weave a basket, and that's maybe a little more complicated. Other things are, we're just going to go get a milkshake. And I think sometimes when I think about adding the enchantment or the flair, the pizzazz to the day, we can set ourselves up for failure because it seems like it has to be so complicated in our minds. And so we come up with this like really complex thing. And by the time we actually try to implement it, it's not fun. We're not having fun and the kids aren't having fun. And we're like, you're supposed to be having fun here, And sometimes it just needs to be simple. Like it doesn't have to be glitter. It can just be milkshake or, planting pumpkin seeds, just finding those small little ways to add a little spark to the day. I think that's really good.
Exactly. I think that's really important. The biggest thing I can say about that is as moms, we have a tendency to look on the Instagram post or Pinterest or whatever, and we see these fabulous book clubs because, hey, I write about book clubs all the time. I'm not going to put the boring we're sitting there drinking our milkshake on. Why would I write a post about that? But I am going to give you an article about how we did all these amazing things because that gives you ideas. And I'm not saying you need to do all of those ideas at one time. Sure, if you want to. have fun with it, but take one of those ideas and do something with it, or find your own idea, something that fits you. You know, I always say I don't like to cook or things, and when I take the kids in the kitchen, I used to do those radish boxes, you know, where we you buy, get them in the head, tell you to get all the recipes and you make things. And when we would do that, I literally had to change it to that's all we did that day because it was like 3 hours of us in the in there making one stinking dinner. And by the end of it, and we would do it on Wednesdays for some reason. And by the end of that, we'd have church that night, and I'd be like, I can't even go to church. I can't function. I can't do this. I'm like, why am I doing this? So if I know that cooking with kids is stressful, that it's totally off my plate, I'm going to run to the bakery and buy something, you know? So just pick what's best for you to do.
Yeah, and I think about that too with like when I encourage people to choose what poems they're going to include in their memory work. I say don't worry so much about like the list of poems you think you're supposed to memorize. Like what is interesting to you as the mom. And sometimes if we sort of start with that, like what we're excited to do with our kids, and don't try to fight against the way God made us there, it ends up working out more smoothly for everyone.
Exactly.
Well, you've mentioned your book clubs, and I know we share a love of books and poetry. And so I was wondering if you could share some of your creative suggestions for enjoying literature of all varieties, sort of with maybe some different ages, what that might look like at different times of our homeschool career, or then if you have multiple ages, because I know, like my family, we have a wide age range.
Okay, so that's a great question. And how we do all our book clubs is every single one of them, no matter what age group it is, we have rabbit trails. So what a rabbit trail is just simply where we're digging into something in the book that takes a little bit of different slant. Maybe it's a historical reference. Maybe it's a science thing that we could go do an experiment, something like that. That's just a rabbit trail. It's things like if you're sitting doing read aloud with your kids, you might be talking about something like say Mr. Popper's Penguins. You're reading that one, and you start thinking about, well, penguins, could they live in a refrigerator? I don't know. And then you start talking about and learning about penguins, and so you might go start digging around on Google, or you run to the library and you get some more books about penguins, or maybe you find this experiment about how do penguins stay warm in the Arctic, and so you do an experiment on that, and you can just take it to all these different levels. And that's kind of what we do is we teach parents, we try to help them to learn how to do that. And we know that's hard for a parent to just go, okay, well, we're studying Mr. Popper's Penguins, so let me go read the book before, and now let me pull out all these ideas. So we kind of do that for you. We give you all the ideas so you can do that kind of thing. And honestly, it's hard sometimes to bring the older kids and the younger kids together, but you can do it in ways like if you're reading a book that maybe appeals to a large age group, like The Birchbark House, like I was talking about, we just did. That's a really great book in that it's elementary, but you can really see some depth in it that can go into middle school. And so even high schoolers, if they don't know anything about Native Americans, it's a simple read, so that makes it easier to read in elementary, but it has some aspects of it that maybe they don't know. I mean, I actually learned stuff while researching that about Native Americans. So you could take that and take different areas of it. Like the little kids, you could go out into the nature and you could see if you could find a crow that's mentioned in the book, or you could talk about corn, or how is corn planted, how does it grow. Whereas your older kids, you could really have them delving deep into Native Americans, what it means to be a Native American, what about the Trail of Tears, and the thing about the Indian schools that were horrible and I didn't know about and didn't even end until like 40 years ago. But these type of things, so you can make it so much of a different extreme just by pulling out pieces and parts of the book. And I don't encourage things like sitting and going, okay, we read this, now reading comprehension, one of the authors say, that's not fun for the kids. That kind of sucks away all the joy of reading. But if we can take what they read and say, here's what it looks like in real life, or even go to, if you have some site local to you where you could go and talk about that. We went to Taos, New Mexico 2 years ago. And up there, my kids were just fascinated because where we live, there aren't any Native Americans around because basically they were shoved out a few hundred years ago. And so they're all in New Mexico. So when I said my great-great-grandmother was part Cherokee. We've never met a Cherokee person, but we went to New Mexico and met Cherokee people. So that was pretty cool. I'm not saying get in your car and drive hundreds of miles away, but if you were to live near something or you're going on a trip, you can do that too. So that's all you need to do is just kind of add things in that you see in the book. And it could be as elaborate as a field trip, or it could be as simple as, oh, let's go make some fry bread, mix some flour and water together and toss it in a skillet.
And sometimes it might look like a documentary. So if we're reading
Right.
something that's, in Europe or Asia or set in a different time period that we can't, hop on a plane and go check out, sometimes we can kind of visit, Greece or visit China in a way just through watching a documentary. And it's okay to bring in some of the screen time too, even if you're reading
It
books.
is. I totally agree with that. I mean, obviously, my business is built on technology, and kids have to have some screen time. But that's the great thing about it is that you need a little of both. You need a little of screen time because these kids are growing up in a world where everything is screens. And if we say we're not going to let our kids have any screen time, well, then you're really not preparing your kid for life. But they also need to go out into the wild. They need to go out in nature. They need to see things out and they need to see how other people live, just not the people in their community. And I think that's really important too. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's the value of books in general is they introduce you to people that you might not speak
exactly.
to on a regular basis. It causes you to see with new eyes, to kind of get inside someone else's head. And so that's really
Exactly.
valuable to read a wide variety of books too. I know I didn't ask you this. I didn't tell you ahead of time I was going to ask you this, but do you have any favorite read alouds or books that you and your own family and your kids have really enjoyed? You mentioned the Birch Bark
Oh,
House.
I am really bad at this question. In fact, I'm doing a poetry challenge right now, teaching a poetry challenge, and they asked what my favorite poem is. And I said, I can't tell you my favorite poem because I don't have one. I have one at different days and times. And so,
Yeah.
as far as different books, there are some that have affected me stronger than others. When my high schooler, when we were doing Animal Farm, loved that book. I mean, really got into Animal Farm. Birch Bark House was fun. It's probably not my favorite one that we've done, but it was fun and had a lot of new things that we learned that we weren't as uh, knowledgeable about. I loved that dog. It was all about poetry, and the kids really got into writing poetry on that one. That was fun. And plus, the book, the party school was so much fun because we ate dog food, and we
Nice.
literally ate it out of dog bowls. So, so
That's awesome.
so we had fun with that. So, there's just so many things and people will say, "Well, what's your favorite book?" I don't have a favorite book. I really don't. Because, I grew up and I remember in high school, I was huge into Isaac Asimov and Piers Anthony and all the science fantasy fiction type things, Douglas Adams, all those. And then I kind of moved over into other things and I went into historical fiction for a while. And I just don't have a favorite book. Is that not crazy?
No, I don't think it is at all because I do think there's like different times or for different reasons, different books stand out to you. It's hard to pick just one.
I agree. Now, I have books that I'll say there are books that have influenced my life, and I remember reading On the Beach when I was in high school, and that book has stayed with me for I'm not going to tell you how long because I'm so young,
That's
but
right.
for many years. And if anybody says what book has affected you the most, I'll say that one because I remember it being very life changing to me to think about. And not that it's this fabulous book everybody needs to go and get on the beach, but it struck a chord with me. I will say that there are books I hate that I could mention more than books I love because there's just really a handful of books I Mary Poppins, I hate it. I'm sorry.
Mary Poppins, I think, is one of the few books that I really enjoy both the book and the movie, but I don't think of them at all as being related to each other. Like they're totally two
They're
totally
not.
different things.
They're not. The whole time I was reading, I never read Mary Poppins until I started homeschooling. I'd watch the movies, and as a reading, I was writing this book club on it, and my husband would laugh because I'd be laying in bed reading and going, "I hate this. I hate this. Disney saved this. This is horrible. Disney saved this too." Just I hated that book. So yeah, I could probably talk more about books I hated than books that are my favorite.
That is too funny. Well, while we're talking about books, it's actually a perfect segue because one of the questions I'm asking all of my guests this season is just, what are you reading lately right now?
Okay, well, the latest book I've read was Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. It is in poetic verse, but it is a biography, well, autobiography pretty much of her life growing up in the civil rights era. And it is really interesting. I really enjoyed it a lot. But I'm in the middle of doing, like I said, the poetry challenge. So I am literally reading poetry all day, every day right now. So, not an actual book per se, but little excerpts from books, I guess.
Yes. Well, I can think of worse things to have to do with your time than spend it reading poetry.
I
I'm a
know it's
fan.
off. It's a hard job, hard job.
Yes. If you enjoy novels in verse, have you read Inside Out and Back Again? And I'm never quite sure how to pronounce the author's name, but
I have it. I have not read it. My child read it and she liked it. She goes, "Mom, you got to read this one." But I'm always reading a book. So
yes.
I have not read that one, but I will put it on my list to read next. I actually own it and it's in my library.
I loved that. That was one that was, I thought, very powerful to read and talked about. So it's the story. It's I guess, middle grade fiction, but it's
Hmm.
about a young girl who escapes from Vietnam and comes and ends up living in the southern parts of the United States and sort of her journey and experience. And it was beautiful.
I think it's similar to Brown Girl Dreaming, isn't it? Yeah, very
So
similar to the
I kind
chapter.
of have the flip of you. My daughters have read Brown Girl Dreaming and I haven't, but I've
Well, there
read
you go.
Inside Out and Back Again. So I guess we'll just have to swap and read each
We
other's
will.
titles.
All right.
Well, my final question for you is just what would be your tips to a homeschool mom who's wanting her homeschool day to run smoothly?
Well, that would mean mine would have to run smoothly, wouldn't it? I think my first tip would be to say it's not going to. I mean, some days will and some days will be a disaster. And my biggest tip is just if when it doesn't, roll with the punches. Just don't try to stick to something every day that you know isn't working just because somebody else tells you to. Just take your own intuition into account. You are mom, you know your kids. You know your kids better than anybody else on the planet does. You know when they're struggling with something, you know when there's something that they enjoy and they're going to do well with it. And you know how they learn. You can watch your kids and know, like I have one who absolutely learns by everything hands on. And she does not like to sit and read. Now she will read, but she doesn't like to sit for hours and read because she would rather get up and learn it by doing something. I have another kid who would sit and read all day long if I let her. If she said, "I never have to get up to do anything, I'll just sit here and read every book." So you know how your kids learn the best. And I would say just take that knowledge with you and keep in mind that you're doing what's best for them for their lives. And also, when we talked about the education, remember it's not your education. It is someone else's education. And you start them out and you help lead them and you're guiding them, but it's really their education. So anytime my kids start throwing their little fit about, I don't want to do this or don't want to do that, I remind them, hey, I'm not the one that's going to be educated at the end of this. I'm not the one that is going to go looking for a job and I don't have the skills or whatever to do that. This is when you need to decide what do you want to do with the rest of your life and how are you going to get to there. And you can start doing that even in elementary school. If you want to live here with mom and dad forever, sure, okay. Guess what? You're going to be doing a lot more chores, mister. but, you know, give them the opportunity to take ownership because once they take ownership of their education, it makes it a whole lot easier to have a successful homeschool.
Yeah, that is really good encouragement. So often I think we can be tempted to try to view them as these projects or these computers. I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but as soon as we try to start mechanizing it and push the right buttons, and then we're like, come on, robot, why aren't you doing what I've programmed you to do? It does not work because they're individuals and they're persons. So to be able to view them as individuals and to remember it's not ultimately up to us to get out this perfect result that we have in our head, but to appreciate who God's made them to be. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Dachelle, where can people find you all around the internet?
Well, I'm at hithechocolate.com. I am at literaryadventuresforkids.com. I am on Facebook and Instagram, both of those. I think, well, actually, Instagram, I think it's hithechocolatblog.com because somebody stole my Hi the Chocolate before I could get to it. And I'm on Twitter and Pinterest there too. So you can find us, but don't follow me on Twitter because I'm never over Twitter. I just don't do the Twitterverse. Facebook and Instagram.
I've avoided Twitter so far. Like I can barely keep up with what I'm already on. I don't
Yeah, I
need
know.
more noise in my life.
I literally detest social media, but I mean, I love it for so many things, and there's so many. But it's a time suck, and you go in there, you're like, I'm just gonna check this one thing, and 2 hours later, and I bought a bathing suit, and how did that happen? you know, so
Yes.
yeah. Facebook though, and I have two groups in Facebook. I have a book club, family book club by Literary Riches for Kids, and I have a Relax Charlotte Mason homeschool group there. So that's where you're gonna find me the most, is in those groups and talking there.
Great. I will have all of those linked up in the show notes for this episode over at humilityanddoxology.com. Dachelle, thank you so much for chatting with us today. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much. I had a good time.